This is my podcast, Katy Needs a Podcast. When I started Katy Needs a Life 17 years ago, it was very different than it is today. The concept has changed, it's evolved, and eventually it became what it is now. These kinds of ventures are more than just fleeting projects, they are our life's work. And we hope to leave something behind and live longer than our physical self with these things. But I don't want to talk about me. Instead, I want to introduce you all to Charles, aka Creep Church, another person who has been around the scene for 14 years.
13.
13 years. Go ahead and say, hey, Charles.
Hi.
So let's get into it. You've been working on this project for 13 years. How did you get the ball rolling?
It started when I was living in Rhode Island, which is where I'm originally from, outside Providence, Rhode Island. And I was playing in a band at the time that was mostly improvisational. I played acoustic guitar, processed heavily, and run through various loopers and effects pedals. And I had another guy who played like a lap steel in much the same way, and it was very percussive. And we would go into things without songs, without a set list, and often how we would tune the guitar would be the indicator for what kind of direction we were going to go in for the night. I have been writing songs for most of my life at this point. I had been playing in bands and writing songs. This current project started in right around New Year's of 2012, so just about 13 years ago. I wanted to document the songs I was writing because I had just gone through a really awful breakup and moved back to my hometown. It was my first little apartment that I lived in by myself. I threw myself into music because it was the only thing I knew how to do that would get me through. And I just started writing songs as a practice, as therapy, really. And I wanted something to document it. So the first Creep Church tape I recorded in 2013, and I put it out right around the 2-year mark. So it was like January of 2014. And that was like a 42 copy run, I think, of cassettes. And it was a long one. It was like a 28 track, 90-minute tape.
That's a long one.
So that's kind of where it started. I did that tape. I did another release, just a little EP of covers a couple years later. I started a second tape and didn't finish it for a long time, but I think things really changed when I moved out to Kalamazoo, which is when I started playing live under this name. And then the pandemic happened, and I welcomed a daughter. My wife and I had a child. Life sort of took on a new sense of urgency, I think, with an existential threat like COVID at the
Yeah.
time was. So I consciously decided to start working through this backlog of material and recording and releasing as much as I possibly could. That kind of leads us to where we are now. I think I've got 22 releases now, including singles, full lengths, EPs, covers, collections, things like that. So it's a lot of material, but I've recorded most of it within the last 5 years.
Yeah, I listened to Going Home earlier, and then I also listened to Requiem and Heavy Light. And are you playing a guitar or are you playing a bass? Because it sounds,
That's bass.
yeah,
That's electric bass. So I started out on bass. That was my first instrument. I started out playing bass in bands when I was 14 years old. I mean, it's like tale as old as time. You play these clubs in Providence, and you'd have to sit outside till the doors open because they're all like 18, 21 plus, and go back into the parking lot after you were done playing. They were like real serious about stuff like that. So it was very Tommy Stinson. I took up guitar about a year or two later, and it was mostly acoustic guitar. Because I picked it up because I wanted to write songs, and at the time, I don't think I felt limited by bass, and I wanted to have a full spectrum of sounds of tones. So I learned guitar, and I stuck to guitar for many years, but I've always gone back and forth between playing bass in bands and playing bass by myself. And it was right around the time we went back east for my wife's baby shower in October of 2019 that I got a bass again for the first time since I was maybe in high school. I was gifted a bass guitar by my father-in-law, who collects instruments until he runs out of space, and then he starts giving them away to people and selling them.
That's a very nice type of father-in-law to have.
Oh, he's wonderful, a wonderful guy. But I got that bass like, and at the time I thought I was like, I'm preparing for parent mode and preparing to settle down and raise a daughter, and I thought I was pretty much done with music at that time. I thought it was something that I'd have to circle back to years from now. But then I got the bass and I wrote a record within a month. I had like 11 songs written on bass for solo bass. And that became my third Creep Church release, bass songs. I've been switching back and forth between bass and mostly acoustic guitar in terms of what I write for, and it'll write things on guitar and arrange it for bass, or write things on bass and arrange it for guitar. The way I approach both instruments is largely the same. So yeah, that's long story short. That is bass you're hearing.
Going into Creep Church, it was like essentially like a diary for what you were going through at the time. But what was kind of influencing you to like make the type of music that you were?
Oh, geez. If I had to answer that honestly, I would say where I was. I think the setting is more important than anything. I was kind of like licking my wounds in this little apartment. It was a little cottage style apartment in this old building from the 19th century. I was in Georgiaville, Rhode Island, which was an old mill town, northwest corner of Rhode Island. It was where the Georgia cotton mill was for many years until they moved production down south. They had two buildings that were side by side, and they were originally rooming houses for the immigrant workers that they would bring in from like Poland and like Portugal and Italy at the time. So this was like early 20th century. I got an apartment in one of these buildings, and it was essentially like it was laid out like a cottage. I had a big room, bathroom, bedroom, living room off of it, and the acoustics were unbelievable. And I could play guitar, acoustic guitar, like as loud as I wanted at all hours of the day, which was good because I couldn't sleep at the time. I just really fell in love with the way that apartment sounded. I would take long walks and kind of go up to the reservoir and walk the length of the Woonasquatucket River into North Providence in the Centerdale, kind of take in all like the kind of clash between this kind of bucolic New England and Nathaniel Hawthorne kind of nature, and then this very industrial recent past, which was still on full display in Esmond, Rhode Island. So it was very much inspired by these long walks I would take and the connections I was forging with friends. Because I mean, I had been in a relationship for a while and it had been bad for a long time, and those kinds of things can be terribly isolating, and you feel like you got nothing, you know. And then suddenly I'm on my own, and the world's opening up to me again. And I think that was what really inspired me to pick up the guitar and start writing these songs and go in this direction. I had done the singer songwriter thing for a long time, or tried to anyway. But it came to a point where I was writing music that was too complicated for me to sing and play at the same time. So I had to make a choice, and I ended up choosing the guitar, the instrumentation, rather than the vocals. So that was never a natural thing for me anyway. So all my music is instrumental, well, most of it anyway.
You have such vivid imagery with everything, like your descriptions of where you were at the time. Even the name of your project is like very vibrant. Like in my mind, I'm seeing like kind of like a creepy old church, you know, like the type that you would see out on the East Coast because things are just older there, but it's like
Yeah.
that like single room type of thing and like a creepy shadow and there's like a graveyard and dead trees and shit. But like how did you come up with the name and like what visual are you trying to invoke? Like, is there something that you were basing it off of?
The name was an inside joke between me and my bandmate at the time. a lot of time. I mean, I was playing in this band, and we would do a fair amount of shows. But I was, and they would, like I said, it was improvisation. But on Sunday mornings, I would get up early. I would drink a ton of coffee, like multiple pots of coffee, and kind of like stay in my pajamas till like 1 o'clock, watching true crime documentaries and playing guitar. I'm like, oh, so this is like church for creeps. So it was just a joke. I just called it Creep Church as because it needed a name. The name referred more to the process than the project. I didn't see it becoming a project at the time. It was just an exercise for me when I started it.
Circling back kind of to the province or Rhode Island, it's like such a shift of your day to day, I would think, to go from a place that is objectively more high paced than where you presently are, and like the places that you can go to gig and stuff are like New York City and Philadelphia and province. And like, how have you adjusted? I mean, obviously you had the big life change welcoming your child into the world, but like before that, how are you adjusting to this big change?
Well, the reason we moved out here, my wife is an academic librarian in universities and colleges. She'd been working at these small liberal arts schools back east, like she was at Vassar, she was at Emerson, Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. She was constantly running into like hurdles in terms of like funding projects she wanted to do. And I kind of subtly pushed her. I was like, you should really look at state universities because there's always money in state universities. The job security is generally a lot better because you're not dependent on an endowment or private tuition necessarily. I mean, the funding comes from the state. Lo and behold, I think it was April of 2018. She interviewed out here at WMU at the Waldo Library and got the job. At the time, we had been married less than a year, and we're thinking about our future and planning a family and stuff. And we were both like, I was working in Cranston, Rhode Island, which is like just 5 minutes out of Providence, so you'd have to go through Providence every day. And Amy was working in Boston, so I'd drop her off at the train station at 6:15 in the morning. Then I would drive down 95 and battle traffic to get to work, and then traffic on the way back, pick her up at the train station. We were putting in like 16-hour days. I mean, it was for her, it was like an hour and a half of commute each way on the train and walking. So it was just the pace of life and what we were paying out there. I mean, of course, the cost of living's gone up everywhere, but I mean, the cost of childcare is just absolutely obscene in New England. So we were thinking about having a child, and we found out about like the Kalamazoo Promise. It was a big reason why we ended up choosing to come to Kalamazoo, and ultimately I'm glad we did. I mean, it's been an adjustment. Like I'm not used to shows that start on time and end early. You know,
Yeah.
I've played shows, I've gone to shows, I've gotten to come home, gotten a great night's sleep, and been able to do stuff the next day. Whereas it's like, you had Providence time was very much a thing where it's like, I can't tell you how many shows I played back east where it was like, I put the time we were playing on the flyer, and people show up 45 minutes after we played, and it's like, well, you missed it.
Yeah.
I find there's a level of enthusiasm here that's a little more infectious. I mean, the scene is centered more around the colleges and the like the Vine and these like student neighborhoods and stuff. And there's more of this like enthusiasm and drive to do it yourself because no one's going to do it for you. I mean, you've been here, you've seen how many clubs and bars and stuff closed since COVID, how many places just stopped hosting live music altogether. I mean, it's gone back to being in basements and garages and like creative spaces that we had to find a play in. I remember when I was younger, I was always on the lookout for those kind of spaces, and it wasn't as much of that where I was. I mean, it was very much dominated by the bar scene. It was very much dominated by alcohol sales and how many heads you can get through the door to pay a cover. I know in Boston they wouldn't book you if you didn't have a solid draw. I've always ran into that trouble in Boston, trying to get my feet wet in that pool. Yeah, Kalamazoo has just been generally a lot more enthusiastic and vibrant. I mean, I didn't expect It's such a small city to contain such multitudes. But I've been pleasantly surprised at every turn. So it's been the right decision, and I feel like I had to move out here for this project to really blossom and become what it is. Because if I'd stayed at home, I would have just. I mean, I'm a stay-at-home dad now. I've been a stay-at-home dad since the pandemic. Um, and if I had been trying to do this back home, it would have been very much hampered by the rat race we were running in and just the pace of life we were used to living. I mean, like I said, you put in 15, 16-hour days, you come home and there's not much left in the tank, you know?
No, and I mean, I can't really imagine that. I mean, when I was a kid and my parents said that they had to like drive to work and it was 45 minutes, I was like, "Oh my God, that sounds awful."
Yeah.
So the process of songwriting is different from person to person. Can you talk more about what your approach has been?
I mean, ultimately, it is a practice. It's something, it's a muscle you have to work. It's something you need to be intentional about. And then that's something I've really tried to hammer home to people. It's like, it's not so much that I am sitting around all day with a guitar in my hands to be as prolific as I have been. It's that when I have free time and I'm able to do it, it's like I have to set intentions, and it's like if I have a half an hour to myself, and I'm going upstairs to my guest room, I'm gonna take out an instrument. I'm gonna do one of a few things. I'm either going to write something, record something, I'm going to arrange something, or I'm going to practice something. Like that's really it. And that's I think having a child, being a father, and especially being a stay at home parent, has kind of made me have to step back and set intentions with the work. I can't walk around all day meditating with a guitar in my hands, waiting for a riff to magically appear. You know, it's more like it's more like a writing practice where you sit down and you make it happen, whether it's coming naturally or not. Like ultimately, the goal for me, what I've always tried to do with my writing, is to kind of take moments, experiences, relationships, people, things that have shaped and defined me, and kind of use the music as a way to capture them in amber, kind of save them for myself as like a little gallery to go back and look at. I've said before, for me, music has always been me seeding a wilderness to hide myself in. It's been a way of self-soothing for sure, and of communicating rather, but indirectly, because like I said, I don't write lyrics to any of these songs. I let them speak for themselves as instrumentals. I kind of prefer it that way because it can mean something very specific to me, and it might communicate something to another person, but it's not necessarily going to be the same thing. I'm not directing them. You know what I mean? I'm more presenting something, an image or a texture or a moment in time, and kind of decorating it. You know, letting them take those little ornaments and hang them up as they will. And I think that's one of the great things is the exchange. That exchange is very personal. It's very private. Ultimately, it's incredibly affirming. That's ultimately why I do it. But the process of songwriting is largely a means of self-soothing, making sense of things, and crystallizing experiences and images, and keeping them in a way that I can return to them and recall for my own benefit more than anything.
It's actually kind of a shocker that you're not a lyricist because you speak quite poetically.
Thank you.
I don't really like I've sat behind the piano and I've like tried to depict whatever I'm feeling into the piano and like I do, but it's easier I think when you have lyrics, when you write the thing that tells people kind of the story to go along with it. So like what do things like love and pain sound like? You know, like how do you do that?
How do I do that? It's a good question. What does love sound like instrumentally? I find there's these rhythms I return to. It's a lot of 3/4, a lot of 6/8. So it's very well dancey in a classical sense and like a waltz sense of the word. So it's almost inviting you in to move with me. I don't know. It's really hard to define what like love would sound like musically without words to really explicate or define more clearly your intentions. For me, I think love and pain, it all comes down to the same kind of ache that I think is kind of inexorable and hard to define, but it comes through in the music. It's like it's there. It's like it's at the very core of everything I make.
Because of the emotions that you're trying to convey, do you find it easier to be working as like a solo artist? Like, do you feel that it would make it any better to have like secondary instruments or like a live drummer? I feel like if like you're trying to be free about like the how you convey things, it seems like it'd be easier to be without.
I mean, the reason I play solo, it's born out of necessity, mostly. The way I play guitar and the way I approach it, it all came about for it all like kind of coalesced for me during college, which was a long time ago now. I lived alone in college. I had a single dorm room for 2 years, 2.5 years really. Like I never drank, so I never really fit in with the party scene at the school I went to. Playing music was my way to kind of escape the awkwardness and the kind of pain of social interaction that didn't go anywhere. So I would spend a lot of time, and this is before I was like properly diagnosed and medicated for my depression, by the way. So I just spend a lot of time kind of locked in a room, toying with my guitar. And the other, really important tool that I had was a tape recorder, which I still demo all my ideas on cassette, like direct to a little mono tape recorder for it's a Radio Shack one from like 1996 or 97. Like it's
That's
old.
awesome. Yeah.
I got my goodness. So that's kind of how I learned how to play that way. But I've always wanted to work with a broader palette. It's just every time I tried to, I how do I say this? I haven't found a lot of people are really safe to bring into this really private universe that I've created. It's esoteric. My process is not something that people grasp with any sort of immediacy when I try to tell them about it. So I mostly keep it to myself. I guess it's more of a Molly Drake than a Nick Drake thing, you know? I've always wanted to work with a broader palette, and believe it or not, I always hear drums in my head, and the way I play, it's like I'm trying to create a bass movement and throw a melody up top with a solid driving rhythm. I mean, to me, that's a song. I've kind of created that in the absence of having people to play with. It was born out of that necessity that I needed to fill the space. So the way I play is, it longs for collaboration, but it's defined by not having any. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, I think it does. Is there anything that people should be looking forward to in 2025?
yeah, I'm hoping to do more live work. I'm hoping to do more shows. I'm putting out a double album cassette of my last two bass releases, 3/4 and Going Home. One's going to be on each side. So it's going to be a 60-minute cassette. So I'll be selling those at shows. Hopefully I can book some stuff. So reach out if you want to book me, creepchurch@gmail.com. I have a very portable and easy rig to bring to shows. It's not difficult at all. But I'm hoping to do more live shows. I have the tape coming out. I tracked a song for another 7-inch with my friend Chris from Cult Songs, which I'm hoping will come out at some point in the next year. And I just wrote another EP that I'm also hoping to record as well. So I mean, I've always got stuff going on, but the live stuff is really what I'm trying to do again. I feel like I've been inside for 5 years, and I'm ready to step out and actually connect and commune with people in a tangible way. So hoping to play more shows.
Heck yeah. Well, then everybody should go follow Church on Instagram to see the updates as they come out, because I assume that is probably where a lot of the announcements will be as they start to trickle out this year. What are like two to three bands that you'd want to shout out that you feel like need more recognition?
Sure. And that's a loaded question because I have my feet planted in two scenes, two different coasts. There's a lot of great artists out there that I played with. Probably the first person I want to shout out, he's done a lot of graphic design work for me. I did a split single with him about a year or two ago. My friend Chris Kelly in Providence, who records under the name Cult Songs, and he plays bass in a band called Exploding Zones. And before that was he led a project called Invisible Hours, whose second album is just monumental for me. I listen to it all the time. But he has been probably like the single most powerful and positive, accommodating influence I've had in my life these past few years. He's instrumental to what I do as Creek Church. I don't think I would exist in this form without his input and without his enthusiasm and friendship. So Cult Songs would be one I would look at. And similarly, an artist I've discovered since I moved out here was the Rutabaga, Josh Henley's project from South Bend, Indiana. I was given their last record leading up to as a birthday gift last year. I spent a lot of time with that album. Last spring, I lost both of my grandmothers in the space of 2 months. They both passed away, one suddenly, one after a brief illness. And I had to go back home twice. And both times I went back, I was listening to this record a lot, intertwined throughout like the music, these hooks and these great arrangements and this powerful drumming and great melodies are these lyrics about loss and grief. And it was really resonating with me in a way. And I've since become friends with Josh on a personal level, and he is one of the kindest people I've never met. He is disarmingly kind. So like it's like, are you for real? Are you really this nice? I'm from the East Coast. People aren't this warm, But he's been really great in the brief time I've known him. And his music is wonderful. He's the real deal. Yeah, I hope to collaborate with him soon on maybe one of his Weekly Beats projects. So he's another one that I have to shout out. A third, does it have to be musician? Can it be like a different disciplinary artist or?
Sure, yeah.
Well, one of the best friends I've made in the Midwest is a poet, and she's dipping her feet into performance poetry. She's doing a master's program in Bloomington right now. But my friend Courtney Jones, she's got a couple spoken word releases up on Bandcamp. She's done some chapbooks, and we've had a correspondence going on since she moved out of Kalamazoo. I met her when she lived in Kalamazoo with her now ex-partner right up the street from me. She has also been a pivotal person, and she's informed and directed a lot of what I've done and what I continue to do just through this collaborative friendship we've shared. Can I say one more person?
Yeah, sure.
One of the first people I connected with out here was Jeremy Kronk from Lucius Fox. And I just want to say he is a hidden gem. Great guitarist, great arranger. Can't say enough good things about the person that guy is. So I'll give him an honorable mention. Jeremy.
Those are all great recommendations for people to look into. And Lucius Fox is amazing. Jeremy is amazing. He's another person where it's like just shockingly nice. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, are you a real person? And the Rutabaga, they've played up here a couple of times, and I know I caught them once, and they are so good. Given that we've entered a new year, is there any advice that you would give people to stay on top of their resolutions?
Yeah, set intentions. Be intentional. Take the time that you that you have dedicated to doing the work, and keep it dedicated to doing the work. If you show up, it'll happen. It'll happen. I don't remember who said it, but someone, I wish I could find the full quote, but the magic is what happens when you keep showing up. So keep showing up. That's the best advice I can give you, is to set intentions and keep showing up.
That is really great advice. Well, this has been an amazing conversation with Charles from Creep Church. Thank you again for meeting up with me and giving me some of your time so that we could learn more about you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, where can people find you?
I'm on all the major streaming sites, Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff. Bandcamp is good because you can buy the music there, and I actually make a little money that way, which is nice. I'm on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram. That's the only social media I have. Yeah, come find me and drop me a line. Listen to the music, take what works, leave the rest, and send me a message. I'm happy to make new friends. Always trying to meet new people out here.
As always, I have a little advice to give y'all, like stay chill, be rad, try to do the right thing. Charles, which of your songs should we spin out to?
Far leaves from going home.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, everybody have a good week. We'll see you next Monday.